This is GTV, the channel that saves the Earth.
Wow!
Welcome to the world of Parodius, a series of video games that were huge in Japan and little known or completely unknown everywhere else, as it almost always is. The 5 games in the Parodius series were released in Japan from 1988 to 1996, and there were a few others related to these that came out around that time. Under normal circumstances, Parodius would have been a forgotten series of games that no one really got to play, but Parodius is still remembered, revered, and lives on, thanks to dedicated die-hard fans. As well, new fans are brought in through periodic lessons in the series that come from these older fans that help expand the game's awareness, and then new converts in turn do likewise, amplifying the game's reach. Probably you, the ones who are watching this video, fit into this complex web somewhere. And I'm glad you're here because this video is going to be a great celebration of the Parodius series. If you're a newcomer, this is actually the 3rd in a series of videos highlighting Konami games that were brilliant and massive hits in Japan, but ones where Western gamers got the short end of the stick. For parts 1 and 2, go check out the Twinbee and Goemon stories. Here we go. Since I've covered this in part before, I'm going to skip many of the platitudes about Gradius. We already know how great and groundbreaking it was, yada yada yada. But for the complete story, though kept short, the origin point of all of this goes back to 1981, with a game called Scramble, Konami's first scrolling shooter, and one of many games released in the early 80s space shooter game craze. When it came time for Scramble 2, Konami ended up releasing 2 games in 1985, that evolved from that development. Twinbee, which actually came first, and Gradius. The 2 games coexisted, and the differences were solidified in that Twinbee would move up and down, left and right is... Twinbee would be vertical, Gradius would be horizontal. Twinbee colorful and cute, Gradius dark and serious. Twinbee on Earth, or Earth-like places, Gradius in alien worlds. Twinbee could be co-op, Gradius strictly single player. And the 2 games would keep this formula strictly, Salamander notwithstanding. But in that ironclad rule that Konami created for itself, a loophole existed. Gradius could, and would, spin off into different creations, so that Gradius could stay pure and the gameplay style that was challenging and enjoyable could be exported to other games. And so in 1988, Konami gave us Parodius, a portmanteau of parody and Gradius. It was the 6th Gradius-style game to come down the pike in 3 years, so you could see how hot the demand was for more games in this series. Now, on the surface, it's easy to say that Konami just took Twinbee and Gradius and kind of mixed them together. But the formula that gave us the first Parodius was an alignment of the stars rarely seen. While Gradius was a hit in the arcades and on family computer, Konami wanted to bring Gradius to the MSX computer as well. In fact, Konami had most of its games on the MSX in one form or another, and these even outnumbered the amount of games you could get from Konami on family computer. Before Parodius, Twinbee and Nemesis were already available, along with other Konami games that made use of the unique dual-slot system found on the MSX. In simple terms, many models of the MSX had more than one cartridge slot, and so with 2 games plugged in, you could unlock various features, if programmed to do so. If you play Nemesis in slot 1, and put Twinbee in slot 2, you can play Nemesis with Twinbee elements added to the game. If you played Nemesis 2 with Penguin Adventure in slot 2, you could play as Penta. Really an amazing feature, with so many possibilities and cool Easter eggs that you could find by experimenting with different cartridge combinations. The concept of switching out sprites was carried over from this to an in-house playable demo that Konami programmers played during their downtime while creating Snatcher for the MSX. The production staff of Snatcher would create different parts of the game and play each other's designs. Originally, this funny shooter that mixed up the elements of all sorts of Konami games was just meant to be played for fun, but as more and more time was put into this coffee break game, it eventually became its own project that would see release. The game that would become Parodius was made on the side while Snatcher was in production. And so, Parodius was released in Japan on April 28, 1988, for the MSX home computer. The full title was Parodius, Tako wa Jikkyo o Suku, or in English, An Octopus Saves the Earth. The game was filled with references and gags to Japanese culture, as well as popular Konami games of the day. You can choose from 5 characters: Vic Viper from Gradius, Penta the Penguin, actually Pentaro's dad from Penguin Adventure, Poplon from Nightmare, Goemon, or Tako the Octopus, a new character and star of the game. As part of his backstory, Tako dreamed of becoming a movie star, and after that didn't work out, a video game programmer. He gave up on that dream too, and then set out to destroy his archenemy, Bug. As an aside, Tako and his dream of making games would get callbacks in the future, such as in Super Bomberman R. Okay, so let's take a sidebar for a minute and explain this. I have been asked for years by lots of people, what's the deal with the octopus? Why that? What does it mean? Is it because of all that tentacle manga and all that? Or what? Here we go, let's break this down. The octopus, known as Tako in Japanese, has been intertwined with Japanese culture for thousands of years. Being a seafaring island nation in the Pacific Ocean, octopi were just a daily part of life, then and now. Octopi appear in folktales and legends where they come across as having a smart and stubborn personality. Octopi appear in classical artworks and are eaten daily in various ways in Japan. The word tako has been integrated into the Japanese language as an idiom for someone acting foolish or being a trickster, and it is used in the prefix of several compound words. But bringing this together with the idea of the octopus in the game, and the subtitle of the game, An Octopus Saves the Earth, is the Japanese word takotsubo, which means literally an octopus's pot. These are the traps that fishermen use to catch octopi in the wild. As they are naturally stubborn buggers, getting one out of there is tough, as they stick to the insides and put up a fight. This concept is applied to takotsubo in the idiomatic sense, which then translates into a foxhole, an opening in the ground occupied by a soldier to hide from enemy attacks and use as a firing point. It might seem unusual to those of us who didn't grow up with the imagery of octopi everywhere, but the concept fits well in something like this, an intense shooting game, which Parodius and Gradius are. You'd need to be tough and smart to make it through this game, if it were actually real. And so, in Japanese culture, an octopus makes perfect sense. The other characters and why they are all here are well understood. Each character was featured in a Konami game previously released on the MSX. In a way, you could say that Parodius was a bit of a thank you note to everyone who played Konami games on the MSX. The 7 stages in Parodius are actually the most normal thing about the game. They look like they could fit right in with any other Gradius game. I think personally this was done as a fake out. Yes, we can now look back at all these games and see the whole series as this crazy thing that was funny on purpose. But if you were bringing this game home in 1988, seeing the weird enemies, penguins, the moles, the crazy faces on the Moai Easter Island statues, it would all be part of the joke. To get caught off guard with these things and have a laugh while you're progressing through the game would be part of the challenge. Each stage has a giant boss that fits right in with the theme of this as well. The penguin, the big maids, and all of them are tough, but you can't help but get some amusement out of them. On top of all that, each stage features classical music remixed to fit an 8-bit style. The names of the compositions are all changed as well to fit the game. For example, Swan Lake by Tchaikovsky becomes Waltz of the Octopus. The decision to use classical music came from the short development time, but has become one of the hallmarks of the series. There are even a few clever Easter eggs you can access by typing commands into the keyboard. You can be completely powered up by activating these codes after pausing the game by using the F1 key. Don't forget to hit enter to activate it. That's the first Parodius in a nutshell. The game was only released in Japan and only for the MSX, though later it would appear in Saturn and PlayStation MSX compilations and elsewhere. This, more than anything, sealed the fate of the series from ever coming to the West improper. The MSX was sold in a few countries outside of Japan, but not all places and not many units. Maybe Parodius got imported into a few places, but in 1988 the NES was it, and in places where the NES was not it, something else was, and that thing was not the MSX. I want to go on another sidebar here for a bit, because the MSX had some amazing games. Parodius and so many other games were only for the MSX, yet this machine and its games never, ever gets mentioned alongside other top-selling hardware and software. The only reasoning I could ever come up with is that because the MSX had a keyboard, it was a quote, computer, while the NES, Master System, Atari 7800, and what have you did not. So they were quote, video games. And this one difference somehow divides everything into so-called real and not real gaming by the loudest voices out there. So the MSX, as well as the C64, Apple II, and a bunch of others get ignored, despite having literally thousands of games for each. But then, many of these TV game machines actually did have keyboards anyway. But no one wants to talk about that, except to say it was a massive failure, which really they weren't. The first Parodius game was just the beginning. When we come back, the series moves to the arcades and beyond.
この番組はご覧のスポンサーの提供でお送りします。
パロデュースが出たぞ。
まだ売っとらんよ。
いつも早とちりのタコであった。ちっちゃなかシューティング
パロデュースだ。
もうすぐ発売。Konami。
Parodius for the MSX gave birth to an amazing spin-off of an already stellar franchise, Gradius. But the second installment really put things in motion. That game was called Parodius Da, Shinwa Kara Owarai E. In English, it's Parodius, From Myth to Laughter. Released to the arcades in April 1990, Parodius Da took the formula set up with the first game and perfected it, with high-quality graphics, improved sound, more stages, and crazier enemies, some of which cross into PG-13 territory. Back then, that was pretty awesome. Just don't let your mom find out. The plot of Parodius Da revolves around Takosuke, who has now earned the title of Mr. Parodius. He sees a photo of his father who disappeared 2 years ago in a newspaper. It seems as if his dad has conquered Earth, so he gathers his friends and sets off to find his dad. In Parodius Da, you can choose from 4 characters: Takosuke, Vic Viper, Twin Bee, and Pentaro. I don't know what happened to Goemon. I guess he was busy. Each character's power-up configuration matches a different game. Naturally, Twin Bee uses the one from Twin Bee, Vic Viper the one from Gradius, Takosuke uses the one from Salamander, and Pentaro the one from Gradius 2, Gopher's Ambition. Twin Bee is also, for some reason, pink, even though the character design is not Winbee. The stage backdrops have evolved, abandoning the Gradius-style desolate rocky formations for more exotic locales. Casinos, Greek temples, graveyards, and Japanese paintings all find their way into the game. The bosses as well are huge, beautifully drawn sprites. Of course, there are some obvious parodies on the surface that anyone would get, but there are a few that only Konami diehards could see. The clowns in Stage 2 imitate the attack patterns of the Moai Easter Island heads from Gradius. Chichibinta Rika has attacks based off of the Shadow Walkers from Gradius, especially the Crab from Gradius 2. Sabunosuke moves like the Phoenix from Gradius 2, and his character design borrows heavily from Sam the Eagle, the 1984 Olympic mascot who was used in Hyper Sports, which we know as Track and Field 2. There's actually way more, but we will never move on if we don't just drop it here. But every step of the game refers to, borrows from, or makes fun of something from another game. The arcade version was a success, and Parodius Da received several ports for the Family Computer, Game Boy, Super Famicom, PC Engine, and Sharp 68000 within 2 years. Each of these varies slightly. Naturally, the FC and GB versions are scaled down and have things taken out. The 16-bit versions have different stage orders, removes some, and adds a few that are original. Each version has different original levels on top of everything else. The arcade game was faithfully ported to the PlayStation and Saturn a few years later. Also, the soundtrack to the game was released in July 1990 and has been reissued several times since then. I'll come back to this later, and you will want to stick around for it. But I would be remiss if I didn't mention that the staff roll music from Parodius Da was recycled for the PC Engine version of Gradius. Parodius Da did actually make it out of Japan. The NES, Game Boy, and Super NES versions were sold in Europe, so I guess I should say NES and SNES then. The SNES version was called Parodius, Nonsense Fantasy, while the others just Parodius. The arcade ports for PlayStation and Saturn also made it to Europe too. Americans never knew the pleasure of Parodius, except through game magazines, where it was often cited as one of the greatest games you won't get to play unless you become an exchange student. For about 3 years, Parodius Da spread out across Japan and Europe through several formats, but after things finally settled, the next installment was ready to go in 1994. Gokujo Parodius, Kako no Eikyu wo Motomete was first released to arcades and later Super Famicom. The English name is First Rate Parodius, Pursue the Glory of the Past. Actually, Gokujo doesn't translate well. You could say Grade A, Ultimate, High Level, Superb, etc. The same 4 playable characters from Parodius Da are back, with Hikaru, an enemy from Da, Mambo from Space Manbo, Michael, a flying pig, and Koitsu, a stickman who rides a paper airplane, added to the roster. In 2-player mode, each character has a partner, which knocks the total up to 16. So you can play with Twinbee and Winbee, Vic Viper and Lord British, and on down the line. I don't mean to give Gokujo the short end here, as it is just as good as Da. And I don't mean this in a bad way, but it's just more of the same. You get another fun game that's tough as heck, filled with colorful graphics and great jokes. The gameplay still takes things from Gradius, but now has a heavy dose of Thundercross mixed in, with color schemes such as Hikaru and Akane ships, and all kinds of power-ups such as the tailgun and boomerang. Also added are references to Zexus, Darius, Raiden, and Airbuster. If you look closely, you can see some interesting things hiding in the game, such as Circo Porto Harborland, which were Konami-run game centers in Japan in the 90s. Again, to deconstruct everything would take days, but everything was made with something in mind to trigger the memory of both the casual and die-hard shooter fan. Gokujo received a port on the Super Famicom in 1994. It's mostly a direct conversion, but does add more characters. Goemon returns with Ebisumaru, as well as Dracula-kun and Kid D from Kid Dracula, and Uta and Rupa from Bio Miracle, Bokute Upa. As for a Western release, the arcade version made it to Europe, and that's it. No home ports as well, at least at the time, though Gokujo and Da were ported to the PlayStation and Saturn on one disc, and that was only in Europe, with the title changed to Fantastic Journey. It's why Gokujo, as great as it is, doesn't seem to get the recognition it does compared to Da. There's not much standing out to separate it from that game, and only a few ways to find it. And those versions fell out of print before most people had the hardware to play it on. The wait for the 4th Parodius game would only take a year or so, as Jikkyo Oshaberi Parodius would hit the Super Famicom in Japan on December 15th, 1995. In English, the title means Live Commentary Parodius, and everyone from Gokujo is invited back for another round. Using the Super Famicom sound processor and the SA1 chip, Konami was able to make a very amazing game. One that honestly didn't need an arcade version, so it's no wonder they didn't even bother with one. It's called Oshaberi because it talks! The game is narrated by Tako himself. The actor behind the voice is Joji Yanami, who was the narrator of Dragon Ball. Announcers for Japanese TV shows and anime, which evolved from the silent film era Benshi, are quite common, and so Oshaberi tries to recapture that feel. Taka will yell out different things while playing the game. Some of these are related to the action on screen, and some are just for no reason. Oh, and he mocks you when you lose a life. Oshaberi breaks with tradition and allows some 20th century music into the game, with the most well-known song being by KC and the Sunshine Band. Oshaberi did make it to the PlayStation and Saturn in 1996 with better graphics and CD sound. These versions add the subtitle Forever With Me to coincide with the release of an upgraded Tokimeki Memorial game, which was called Forever With You. The PlayStation and Saturn versions feature tons of unlockable secrets and extra levels. Most notable is the addition of a second voice, Tako's wife, who is played by Noriko Ohara, who was among other things the voice of Nobita from Doraemon. Each character from the past games comes back with a unique weapon set, as is standard by now. Each one borrows from different shooters. R-Type, Twinbee, Darius, Truxton, and of course Gradius and Salamander are all represented. Here's a list of other interesting things you can find in Oshaberi Parodius. In Stage 1 you can find Santa Claus. In the CD versions he's changed to Colonel Sanders from Kentucky Fried Chicken. Sure, they're both kindly old men, but in Japan, KFC is what the upper crust of society eats for Christmas dinner, and statues of the Colonel are dressed up as Santa in December. Also in Stage 1, Panda Ballerina is a parody of Taiwanese singer Judy Ong, who is immensely famous in Japan. One of her hits, Misararete, plays while she's on screen. Stage 2 is filled with references to Tokimeki Memorial, but since you probably never played it, let's just say there's a lot in there. Stage 3 is all about Twinbee. You'll see images of most of the characters in cloud and rock formations if you look closely, as well as power-ups, enemies, and different objects filling up the stage. Stage 4 is dedicated to Goemon. Scenery and enemies all call back to games from the Goemon series, especially Ganbare Goemon 1 and 2. Stage 5 is a complete pastiche of the second level from Zexus, crossing it up with the aesthetics of the enemies and obstacles seen in the Cake and Candy Carnival level of Gokujo Parodius. Stage 6 spoofs Lethal Enforcers, crossing the high-speed levels of the Gradius series with the car chase segments from the arcade game. Oh yeah, you forgot Konami did that one. It's really fun, and you have to laugh seeing penguins driving around in cute little police cars. The reload voice effect is used as well, and the pink and blue justifiers appear in the CD versions. There's a whole lot more, but if you can make it to the boss rush, I guarantee you a long list of puns, spoofs, and callbacks are your reward for reaching the end, as all of the aforementioned games as well as Taisen Puzzle Dama fill the stage. When we come back, put the kids to bed because things are getting sexy.
この番組はご覧のスポンサーの提供でお送りします。
パロディスパロディスパロディスパロディス
あ、なんやって
お茶目スーパーファミコンパロディスだ
Konami.
Alright, let's get to the good stuff. The best stuff. And sadly, the final true Parodius game. Sexy Parodius. Released in arcades in 1996 and soon after for the PlayStation and Saturn in Japan, Sexy Parodius is the apex of the series in terms of design and presentation. The game features amazing hand-drawn 2D sprites driven by 32-bit power that's incredible to see in motion. And this was a time when the hand-drawn Japanese anime style was still something rarely seen, still exotic, and for those of us on the outside looking in, highly requested to be brought to our region. Oh, and there's lots of hot chicks. Sexy Parodius features tons of scantily clad women in risque poses. You know, the way it's supposed to be. Hey, I was over 18 by the time this game came out, so what are you gonna say? We all know what sells. The usual cast returns with 8 character choices overall, including the new addition of Option and Multiple, which are the Gradius drone power-ups, now sentient. Sexy Parodius also features lots of cameos, such as Medusa from Castlevania and Otohime from Yi-Ar Kung Fu. The stage designs, as always, borrow from other games. The most unique of these is the Mouselvania stage, which is styled like stages in Castlevania, but filled with mice, giving homage to the arcade classic Mappy. You can even find some of the items found in Mappy in this stage. As always, Parodius is a side-scrolling shooter, but rather than just making it to the end and fighting a boss, Each stage is based around a certain challenge required to clear that level. Well, the first stage is actually a standard level, but on stage 2 and 5, you have to collect 300 coins. And in stage 6, you have to catch Takosuke before time runs out. And if you can't, then you wind up with a bad ending. But again, Sexy Parodius was a Japanese-only game. By 1996 though, mainstream gaming media, such as EGM and Die Hard Game Fan, consistently featured games that were new in Japan and may or may not be coming over, as people like you and me watched on from afar, praying that somehow the game would get the okay, but it wasn't to be. By the start of 1997, which would have been the earliest possible that the game could have come out, Sega was falling apart. And yes, I know you had a Saturn, but no one else really did. And so many great games were left behind, knowing full well that the Saturn was dead in the water. 1997 was the first year that the PlayStation was super hot, as 16-bit was truly dead. Sorry, Super NES clingers. For the rest of us, it was over. Sony, at least in America, really had this stubborn 3D games are the only kind of games policy. I hated it. Only games with 3D polygons made the cut. Other than Mega Man 8, Mega Man X4, 5, and 6, and Namco Museum, I can't think of anything else that Sony deemed acceptable that was 2D. I'm sure there were others out there, but right now they escaped me. 32-bit should have been nothing but hand-drawn 2D games, but Sony in America refused them at nearly every turn. Even back then, most of those 3D games were awful, pixelated messes. Yeah, I said it. In Final Fantasy 7 and 8, I couldn't even tell what I was looking at half the time. Anyway, importing and unlocking the region lock was easier than ever before, so there was always that. And that was pretty much the end of the traditional series, sad to say. Parodius Da was the only game to make any kind of waves outside of Japan. I don't know what the deal is, but Konami just let most of their series from the 80s and 90s go off the rails or just die out totally in the 21st century. I haven't really gone into detail of how you could play all these games on more modern machines, but there is one semi-simple way. All 5 Parodius games are available on the PSP in one set called Parodius Portable. The MSX version also gets an enhancement, which is cool, but things like the Game Boy and other lesser home versions are left out. It really is the best way to go for an all-in-one experience. There are reissues out there that you can download for PS3, Wii, and Wii U, but those machines are getting so old that by the time you watch this, you might not even be able to access them. So, just go get them all in an emulator. That's what I do. I won't tell if you don't. The only game considered part of the series after Sexy Parodius is Paro Wars, released in Japan in September 1997 and only for the PlayStation. It was a strategy game like Famicom Wars, Military Madness, aka Nectaris, or Vastille. The main plot revolves around different factions that have survived 50 years after the Second Parodius War, who wrestle for control of the world in Parodius War 3. There was also a Paro Wars board game released in 1998. The idea of this is kind of neat, but just like Twinbee, Goemon, and you name it, Konami just keeps bringing us this kind of stuff and stopped the mainline series. I don't mind the spin-off stuff, just keep the main series going. I mean, why a strategy game? Oh, Paro Wars is the Parodius version of Cosmic Wars, which was the military strategy game set in the Gradius universe. Well, you learn something new every day. So what came next? Yeah, you guessed it, mobile phone remakes and pachinko slot games. If you're not from, lived in, or are living in Japan, it's a bit bewildering as to why everything gets a pachinko game, but it's simple. People sit down and put lots and lots of money in them and don't stop, so it's understandable. The same fate has also befallen Gradius as of late. Pachinko machines are a black hole so powerful, no series can escape it. But it wasn't actually the end of the Parodius series. Things carried on in a spiritual sequel. When we come back, the Otomedius story.
この番組はご覧のスポンサーの提供でお
今度のパロデュースは実況付き
実況のタコでーす。そんなことやってる場合じゃないわい。危ないってば。
ハマったら最後実況おしゃべりパロデュース12月15日発売
From Konami.
Over a decade after the last Parodius game, the Parodius series was somewhat reborn, with a new series that kept the Gradius core gameplay mechanics but was still a cute 'em up. This time literally cute, with Otomedius. The title is a portmanteau of Otome, meaning maiden, and Gradius. The game keeps its ties to Gradius and Parodius tight. Appearing first in arcades in 2007, Otomedius offered 4 stages of side-scrolling action with a cast of playable characters that are all beautiful women. Each one has a different power set based on a previous game, like Gradius, Twinbee, and Zexus. The story behind Otomedius centers around main character Aoba Anoa, an 11th grader at St. Gradius High School, who becomes a fighter pilot after bacteria returns to Earth thousands of years after the original Gradius series, where flight aircraft is a lost technology. The game plays just like Gradius and Parodius. It's fun. These graphics are better than I could have ever dreamed. The game was released in Japan for the Xbox 360 as Otomedius G Gorgeous in November 2008, one of many titles Microsoft secured exclusive rights for to make inroads into the Japanese market. The game was an improved and enhanced version of the arcade game, with online rankings, rearranged stages with co-op play, and lots of downloadable costumes and music packs. A sequel followed in 2011, Otomedius X Excellent. Though the game takes place many years after Otomedius G and millennia after Gradius and Parodius, evolved variants of bosses from Parodius make their way into Otomedius X Excellent, as well as from Twinbee, YY World, and many other Konami games. Otomedius X Excellent was the only game that wasn't a direct Gradius game that actually made it to America, being released in November 2011. It's actually a miracle that it ever did, and it's proof that Konami must, on occasion, listen to fan mail. Otomedius G and X were not hits in Japan, yet Konami released it overseas anyway. When it comes to best-selling Xbox 360 games in Japan, Otomedius G and X don't crack the top 50. As a comparison, Star Ocean 4: The Last Hope was the #1 best-selling Xbox 360 game, with 208,521 units sold. Number 50 was Lost Planet 2, with 49,228 units sold, meaning Otomedius G and X failed to sell 50,000 units in Japan. Had they been on the PlayStation 3 or Wii, that number could have been much higher. There might be a third Otomedius game someday, but it looks unlikely, due to these sales numbers, which were caused in part by being exclusively on the Xbox 360, which had less than 1% market share. Well, can't say they didn't try. And that's pretty much it for the Parodius story. I do hope someday a modern incarnation or proper full reissue sees the light of day, and maybe it will. But let's end this one on a high note. I'm gonna leave you with a video game story that I guarantee you or anyone else has never heard. And when you leave here, you'll know the ultimate crazy, unbelievable, most obscure piece of trivia ever. This one will never be beaten. If a new Parodius, Otomedius, or Gradius never comes to pass, take solace in this. The reach of Parodius will forever be entrenched into the culture of Japan and never die out. How do I know? This sound will be played on TV in Japan for the rest of time. What is it, and why do they play it? This sound is known as the Marilyn sound. It gets played on TV as a humorous warning that something risque is happening. The sound comes from Honey Miyako, the boss of Stage 7 in Parodius Da. You hear this sound after defeating her. So how did this sound get on TV? Well, as part of all the soundtrack releases Konami had put out over the years, Parodius Da was one of them. But the soundtrack didn't just have the game's music. The last tracks of the disc were a compilation of all the sound effects heard in the game. That's not too remarkable, but these sounds were easily accessible on a CD, and the Marilyn sound was pulled from it for use in a TV show. In 1996, Hen Chizuru-chan to Azumi-chan made extensive use of the Marilyn sound. Now, I can't really show you much of this show in action, and copyright issues are not my #1 concern here. Anyway, this TV show, which was pretty popular and was broadcast over regular, over-the-air TV, no cable needed, had some scenes where, well, I think you know. And when this certain action happened, it was accompanied by this sound.
Wow!
Since then, other shows have copied this, and include other sounds from Parodius Da, such as and anytime something ribald happens. Over time, the sound came to be associated with Marilyn Monroe, as the other sounds come from stage 2, when you encounter Chichibinta Rika, and a loose connection was made to flying around and under Rika and the famous scene from Some Like It Hot. Even though is the most commonly used one, because all the sounds appear together on one track, together in order, the two get conflated, and it often gets misattributed to Rika, even though is only heard once after you defeat Honey Miyako. Since these sounds from an old video game have crept into mainstream media, you can find forums online asking exactly where the sound comes from and why it's used. But the sound has made it overseas, as it often appears in anime as well. The most well-known example of the Marilyn sound in anime is from Fairy Tail. Now that you know this amazing tidbit, you'll never forget it, and the world can never forget Parodius, even if they never knew about it.